going to make some really dynamic plays. He's good after the catch. He can win down the field. But it is an issue for him whenever there's anyone around him that he has to catch a football.
Alabama wide receiver John Metchie III, pretty electric player. Unfortunately did suffer an injury at the end of the season. Does sound like he may be on track to get on the field pretty early in his rookie season. We'll see where he lands, but 5'1", 102, 187 pounds, 30 5/8 on the arms, 9 1/4 on the hands. Of course, with the injury, we don't have an athletic profile for him, so he's an incomplete profile, but this was a player who we got really excited about as the third wide receiver from the 2020 group before this past season, in which he was elevated. It was him as Jamison Williams were the big two receivers here. But it didn't really feel like the questions that we had with Metchie entering the season changed. We saw a lot of the same things, Keith.
Yeah, I would say this may have been the most frustrating player to watch out of all the guys I had in my region, because I see the potential there. Like, this guy upside is through the roof. And, initially when I started with the Draft Network, I'm like, man, this might be the best wide receiver from this class because, man, you see his release. I think he has one of the best releases out of all the guys in this draft. You see how explosive he is. He's threatening cornerbacks that are 15 yards off of him, and they're bailing out of there anyway because he's just that fast and dynamic as far as a deep threat. But we talk about it's the nuances, right? When we talk about the Chris Olaves, the Gary Wilsons, even his teammate Jamison Williams, you talk about the nuances and they just weren't there. So it's really just trying to properly place this guy, because I think athletically and explosively he's probably off the charts, and I put him up there with any wide receiver in this draft as far as that. But it still comes down, okay, where do I trust this guy as my number one receiver, number two, or number three? And there were certain things within his game that I really question if I can rely on him to be my number one guy.
Well, let's talk about those things and kind of contextualize the conflict that Metchie provides, because he is so enticing in so many different ways, but obviously this is a player who carries a low two for us. So it's not living up to the full potential that he has, and let's talk about why.
Physicality in the stem.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the physicality in the stem against, dealing with physical corners. Like, when guys are in his hip pocket, he's not competitive at the catch point, I guess I would say, the best way to put it. Especially, you think about when his guys at his size, some people say, oh, throw him in the slot, give him that multiple release, and then you see him on tape, you think about the reps against Roger McCreary. He's in his hip pocket, tight coverage, he's physical with him, and he plays the ball, and he's more aggressive at the catch point than Metchie is, and he's the receiver. So, like, that's kind of one of the biggest issues I've seen with him, is just being, and he's a tough guy. I remember, if you go back to, I think it's the 2020 season against Florida, I think they threw a pick, and he comes and blasts the kid and causes a fumble for them to get the football back. Yeah. And it's like, okay, you see that physicality as a tackler, basically, but him just not knowing how, or just not being able to be physical against that type of press coverage mid-stem and get loose from those guys. Just, give them a shrug or a chicken wing or something. Get free from them and create that extra bit of space for yourself.
Yeah, I think, Keith, you mentioned it. Can we be able to rely on him, right? When we talk about maybe a second-round receiver and reliability, what does that mean for a receiver? Catch the ball.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this kid drops way too many passes for me. So I really struggle with him, because I do see the athleticism, I see the explosiveness, the ability to stack and get vertical. I think it's probably his most appealing trait. And he's dense, he's a thick kid, so I think he's strong after the catch. But his hands, he has a lot of concentration drops, and I just don't think he's a natural hands catcher of the football. And so I really struggled with him just in terms of my projection and how high I would want to draft him. But that being said, he does have the athleticism, the traits that gets you excited for him to be a kind of number two at the next level. But, man, he has some things to work on in terms of his hands.
It's a player that I feel like you just have to acknowledge that there's going to be things you have to live with, right? Because he's going to make some really dynamic plays. He's good after the catch. He can win down the field. But it is an issue for him whenever there's anyone around him that he has to catch a football. And I'm not talking about just like contested situations, but just high traffic areas. He just kind of struggles to be natural catching the ball. And, you're talking about the competitive toughness. Like, it is frustrating, especially because I think he's one of the best blocking receivers in this class. Like, this dude gets after people, but as a route runner, it's just for whatever reason, he kind of gets hung up from time to time. So he's one of those guys where it's like everything except for when the ball is thrown to him, I really, really like, and it makes him a frustrating and kind of a polarizing player.
No, I agree. If this was just a purely route running competition,
oh man,
he might go top 5 in the draft, right?
Yes.
He may be the best wide receiver,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm so hung up on it, because it goes to the developmental part, right? And I talked about this with you guys, and just is that developmental. Like, can you develop that in a receiver? Because, like I said, man, I want to draft him so high, so bad, just as his player profile and athletic profile. But all of the things, like you said, being a wide receiver as far as catching the ball, catching in traffic, just catching when anybody's around you, he seems to struggle with it.
Metchie's going to be one of those players who has a soft spot in my heart for a personal reason, and it's because this was one of the first players that you presented when you came into our group in the summertime.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing you go through breaking down the struggles that he had when he had to adjust his catch radius and adjust to the football. And you're new with the group, right? So I can't wait to see that observation and how it manifests itself. And sure enough, when you watch the 2020 tape, that existed, but it was in a more low-volume situation because we had Devontae Smith and we had Jalen Waddle for the first half of the season. And then this same thing, like, seeing your observation kind of manifest itself in John, and John's going to be fine, right? He's going to be drafted on day 2. Joe's absolutely right. He's going to be a player whoever drafts him, your fans are going to throw their hat down and stomp on it in the second quarter, but then he's going to run the whip route against Roger McCreary to win the football game.
Like
right?
Deontay Johnson, right,
Exactly,
with the Steelers?
Exactly right. That's
Yes.
a perfect parallel. Yes. And I bet if you ask Steelers fans, they love Deontay
Right.
Johnson in the grand scheme of things, but there's that one play, and you kind of joke. It's like, okay, you got the bad one out of the way early. Let's play ball now, right? That's going to be John. But I love the Metchie profile because it was one of the first big observations we had you have a chance to present to us as a group, and seeing how you caught that and how we have all collectively seen this player in the exact same way that you did. I think it was a really cool TDN subplot to John Metchie, the football player, who we like in a lot of different ways, but we do acknowledge that there are some limitations here that might make him a frustrating player, and that's why he's down here between the incomplete athletic profile, the injury, and the hands in the second round.